gets stolen, my wife's also joined on the account with me. I can use the key on her phone to basically provision a new key onto my phone. And so this is, it's not all perfect. In fact, people are really working out how do you deal with all this right now on the account recovery side. But I think that's a lot of how the ecosystem is going to move forward.
Could you say again what that little USB key is called again?
Oh, it's a YubiKey. Well, so it's officially a FIDO security key.
Okay.
There's a bunch of companies that make them, but the company that pioneered it's named Yubico.
YUBICO.
YUBICO. In fact, I think 4 years ago we did an event here with their founder, Stina Ahrensvard.
Yeah, but she wasn't on the panel, but she was in it.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, this was the thing right before the election. So yeah, they're now. So they pioneered these little things, and Google and Microsoft and others have gotten behind it in a big way. Now there's a bunch of companies that make them as well. A bunch of Chinese knockoffs, as Stina will tell you. But they're pretty secure. I mean, Google uses these exclusively for their enterprise authentication. They haven't had any phishing incidences with any of their 85,000 employees since they moved to this away from OTP. And their help desk calls are down too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is around this Ubiquon or Google Cloud Titan.
Yeah.
Why don't all your clients that are listed under their MasterCard, Visa, when they requested give out those token some time ago, they said it's too expensive.
It is.
So when you look at the amount of money that is being wasted with identity theft, data breach,
Yeah.
they're spending a lot of money. But if they give us this device, it costs about $50. Titan is sold for $50.
Yeah.
It would solve a lot of problems because they're already losing a lot of money with so much data breach ID theft.
Yeah.
Why do you think they don't give clients the cryptographic token like what you got there?
Two reasons. One, I don't think the economics work, despite all the fraud that's out there. Two, most consumers don't want to carry one of these things and won't know how to use it. So, I love this, and in rooms of security geeks, everybody shows, their YubiKeys that they have. But the real model that will actually get, my wife or my neighbor to use it is when you can embed this and this, which is now happening over the last year. And so I think, again, most people aren't going to, to me this is logical. Look, I got my car keys, my house keys, my, shed keys, my computer keys. It all makes sense. But for a lot of people, they're going to want it to be built into the devices that they're using. And so I think that's where you'll get the progress instead.
Can you explain a little bit more detail? I'm fascinated by risk-based authentication.
Yeah.
What is that?
So these devices can gather a lot of information. I mean, look, right now I'm here, so at least AT&T is my carrier, knows that I'm standing here. They have to know that because they're routing calls to me, so they know I'm here and not in my office a mile and a half that way. There's ways that I hold the device and interact with the device that can generate, some would call it behavior biometrics. I don't know if it qualifies as a true biometric, but there's a signature so that if I'm on my bank app and my 8-year-old steals the phone and runs with it because he wants to go play a game, my bank can probably tell that the phone's no longer in my hands because there's ways that I interact with it. So there's a whole bunch of different data points that you're able to collect about the device itself. You can fingerprint the device, the way people hold the device, interact with it, type with it, move with it, that any one of them on their own is kind of interesting. If you can start to collect 60 or 70 of them, you can really start to throw them through an algorithm and figure out whether it's really the person and the device that you think it is. Yes?
Yeah, one more question that I got. In your presentation, I've been thinking about identity in the age of social media. You got about 1 billion Facebook users, you got Twitter users.
Yeah.
When you create a policy, all these millions of fake users, they're not accounted for it. Whereas they are changing, in some countries, governments, they are even influencing the way people are voting.
Yep.
Everybody can be anything in social media. So what kind of policy framework that you have that people can really be authenticated in the social media, which is very much impossible right now. These companies that you listed,
Yeah.
they're spending a lot of money on so many people that are not even in existence. So here we're not talking about identity theft, but fabrication of identity.
Yeah, well, I mentioned before, synthetic identity fraud is one of the biggest problems that's out there, and that is costing some real money. And being able to actually validate that identities are real goes a long way through that, to solving that. I think there's a real challenge right now that say the internet in general has, but certainly people are concerned both about the internet as a means of free expression, where you've always been able to be anonymous or be operating under a pseudonym, and then the increasing need to be really identified these days because we're dealing with things like bots and others that, you don't know who's who. And I don't have a great answer there, in that I don't know that you can just say that I mean, people have said, well, you need a driver's license for the internet. You need to be fully identified every time you go on. Well, that has some other issues that come with it. And so I don't think we're at that point where that's going to make sense either. So I don't have a great solution other than certainly social media companies are making more progress. I mean, I don't have the social media companies as members here, to be clear. The only technology giant I have is Microsoft, and they're interested in this mostly for the consumer identity systems that they're building that they sell to, to other companies to manage things. But, separate from my work with the coalition, yeah, there's a lot of work going on to try and weed these things out, but it's hard. I mean, this happened a few years ago. Facebook put a real names policy in place. And people, you'd have somebody who, say, a drag queen point out, look, I have this persona that's a drag queen, and I'm performing 3 times a week at these places, but that's not who I am at work. And I'm not going to put these 2 personas together. And my take was, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think you want to mandate that sort of thing. Now, the flip side is if it's a Russian bot who's coming in, it'd be nice to be able to detect them. So I don't have great answers on how to solve that particular problem other than at least weeding out some of the more egregious examples, seems to help. But I don't think social media is doing a particularly good job right now of it. So,
How many dogs have Facebook?
what's that?
How many dogs have Facebook accounts?
At least a few million.
I was gonna follow up on your drag queen thing. If that individual thinks that those 2 things aren't already linked,
Yeah,
they're idiots.
they probably are, but that doesn't mean that somebody wants to be out like that. You might want to have 2 different personas. And I can't think of any reason, policy-wise or otherwise, that, I mean, just me personally, why you wouldn't want to somehow force them to be the same.
You might want it, but it's a practical impossibility.
Yeah.
What I did want to ask though is, you talked about trying to have people prove their identities. What in your policy document, or how much time is put into, and I know it would be implementation specific, but
Yeah.
allowing people to, I don't know how to put this, deal with it when their information is stolen,
Yeah.
and now they don't have control of it, and you want to use these things, but you know they're out there. Is there any guidance or policy related to some things like that the government can help do?
We don't get so much into identity theft. We partnered with the ID Theft Resource Center on an event we did just a month ago. They focus a lot more on that in terms of what to do after your data's been stolen. How do you actually recover your identity? We're focused much more on the digital identity side and the role government can play, we think, in coming up with better solutions than what we have today. So we don't solve everything.
Yeah, so you brought all these companies to the table,
Yep.
having a conversation about identification, authentication, which is great. I don't really get why government needs to be involved. Why can't they develop an authentication, multi-factor authentication solution and standard amongst themselves?
Oh, they already have, that's FIDO.
But so
And
why-
other things. We're not calling for government to do anything there. We're basically saying government should just promote the use of it.
So it's just a.
Yeah, authentication's getting easier,
At the
identity
beginning,
proofing's getting
You were
harder.
talking about hooking up with the Social Security Administration.
Right, that's for
and
identity
using
proofing.
Electronic government. Why does the government need to be involved at all? I don't get that.
This industry's got no idea the first time they see a name and a social security number if it's real or fake.
Can't they use biometrics?
What biometrics? From where?
Well, they're not currently doing it, that's what I'm saying.
So who would build biometric? Yeah, let's play with this a couple steps down the road. Who would set up a biometric database?
The companies that have deep pockets, they would make that.
I don't know of any bank that wants to hold customer biometrics or is willing to do so, particularly in an era where it seems like, if OPM doesn't know how to protect biometrics, why do we think anybody else knows how to protect biometrics? India built a giant database of all their citizens, that's been breached as well.
Well, and then what if they sell it, I mean, what if the bank gets bought by China?
Yeah.
Or something like that, I mean, you don't know, I mean, or
Yeah.
Belgium.
I mean, to be clear, everything that banks have been doing, or that industry's been doing, because government has not played a role in digital identity, has been trying to get around the fact that government doesn't and try to figure out who you are. So we did it with knowledge-based authentication, and the attackers have caught up. And the real politic of the situation is that there's new innovations that are coming out from industry, but everybody's looking at them and saying, hackers are going to get through this as well. At the end of the day, there's only one authoritative issuer of identity. That's the entity that's going to need to play a role. And if we don't have a digital identity strategy that incorporates the government in some role, we're not gonna solve this.
There's some that's overseas in Europe, you can use your fingerprints, so.
Where?
For some extent, we're a little bit slower here, even for the chip-enabled ATM card, it's been popular all over the world until recently in the US.
Mhm.
And I know in Europe, banks got a fingerprint capability, even voice recognition.
Yeah, for authentication, banks can use, so you can do fingerprint at some ATMs, and then the bank has to manage the risk that those templates or images are breached. So like I said, I don't know any, I deal with a lot of bank CISOs in the US, I don't know any of them that are willing or eager to warehouse biometric information. A few years ago, a couple companies that were out here actively pushing that approach, and I've seen every major financial institution turn away from that because there's more, not only, I mean, do they see the risk in it, but there's more and more laws getting passed every year that make biometrics especially protected class of information. I'm also seeing biometric use down in Europe, other than if it's only the on-device match, because then there's nothing to steal, it's protected on the device. But big central databases of biometrics, my take is very controversial, not particularly secure, and not going to be the solution. The other issue is biometrics can be faked. I mean, one point I make is, look, my fingerprints are in China thanks to the OPM breach. I would never use a central match fingerprint system to protect anything I cared about, because it's not that hard for a lot of people, but certainly a well-resourced nation state, to take those images and make a fake fingerprint. This isn't so mission impossible. You can do this these days. That can pass most presentation attack detection systems that are going to be out there. Now, I'm perfectly happy using fingerprint on my smartphone because, you know, step one in compromising the fingerprint on that smartphone is get the smartphone out of my hands. That's not a scalable attack. That's really different. But you know, if I had a stockbroker who said, well, we're going to put a central match fingerprint system in place, no way. Anybody who had my finger images could get right through that. So I don't trust biometrics.
That's how global entry works, though, with fingerprints.
It is.
And facial recognition.
Right.
That's the government.
Yeah, although tied to my password. So, and again, that's a database that's already in place. So one of the things we've asked about is, look, I'm enrolled in Global Entry. If I've gone through the process of enrolling in Global Entry, could they be somebody I'd ask to vouch for me if I'm trying to open a bank account next week? If I've enrolled in TSA PreCheck, could I do that? I have a passport, could I have that agency vouch for me? There's a bunch of agencies who know who I am and have my information. I don't want there to be more, and the private sector is not interested in building their own repositories of information. Well, some companies are, but they're not the ones who are going to win. And so, you know, could you actually put something in place that would allow you to leverage the things that have already been put in place? So I know we were trying to get out of here early, and I've got an early flight tomorrow. I've got kids that I got to say goodbye to before they go to sleep. So, can we call it a wrap?
I'm good with that.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Jeremy, are these slides available?
What's it?
Post on our website.
I could send them to you. Yeah, I haven't sent them yet, but I can send them later tonight or tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you.
Hey, Jim, I enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks.
I know Ross